I just want to move on to the Daily Mail's other story, the headline being Potter set for £13 million as Blues bills pile up. Now, Miguel, I'll come to you on this because we know that Chelsea had to pay Brighton a world record fee of £22 million just to get Potter. The reports of saying, you know, they would have to pay him off £60 million, but we're hearing now with this story here, £13 million. So can you just tell a bit more about this story, Miguel, and how, you know, potentially they've got to £13 million?
Well, yeah, I mean, I suppose the initial figure given that everyone was talking about as being so massive, that's kind of based on the initial deal. But given the clause involved, given how these sort of negotiations work out, it's never quite just as black and white as that. And I think that explains why we're seeing this figure. I mean, again, it's to put it in real world terms, it's not exactly a bad figure given what's happened, but certainly it's a lot less than the fee that Chelsea could have had. But still, I mean, it's still huge money to be constantly paying out managers, especially given that the new owners were supposed to be changing the culture of the club. Instead, they've done what Abramovich has never done, and sacked two managers in a season, or at least seen two managers go in a season. I must say, though, I do, looking at the clip earlier from Jamie Carragher and Gary Neville, I'll be in agreement. I think this feels like, for all that the ownership can be criticised for what they've done in the last few months, this feels like one decision they've got right just because it was getting unsustainable.
Jack, was the job too big for Potter?
Rather than maybe too big, I wonder, did he make the leap too quickly? I mean, obviously it was understandable that he took it, especially given the way the job was explained to him. I think that shouldn't be overlooked either. But ultimately, he's gone from, or his career was on a very steady upward curve, where he was making the right gradual step every single time and naturally seen as a very bright, promising coach. And then he goes from that to one of the highest profile, highest pressure jobs in the world. Because even compared to other managerial roles, given the history of the Chelsea job, the new ownership notwithstanding, there's so much kind of complications around it. And I think that was always going to require a bit of an adaptation period for himself. I mean, even if you look at Chelsea, he never really, bar Osterson's, he'd never really been involved in European football with a kind of a British club in that way. Brighton, you know, no recent history of European football. Yet he was going to a club that won the Champions League a year and a half ago, or at that point, a year ago. You wonder whether, if he was to continue the steady kind of upward curve that his career was on, would it have been better to go to maybe kind of a regular Europa League club first, or one that occasionally gets in the Champions League? But it did manifest itself, given that he never really had command of that dressing room, and that could be seen really in results and how he ended up kind of second guessing himself in so many decisions.
Right, I want to move on to the Times, because their headline is that Chelsea want a new manager in place before the Real Madrid tie. Now, this is as the club are considering 4 or 5 candidates, with Leicester interested in the sacked Graham Potter. But obviously they are talking, Chelsea, about one of the candidates being Julian Nagelsmann. As you can see in the middle of your picture, this story being done by Tom Roddy and Charlotte Dunker here. One candidate, Julian Nagelsmann, obviously is being mentioned. Would he be a good fit for Chelsea, Jack?
It's hard to know, really. I mean, he's someone that's, you know, obviously just lost his job at Bayern Munich in Germany and was obviously linked to the Tottenham job this time last week when Antonio Conte was sent on his way by Spurs. And he sort of fits into the same mould as Maurizio Pochettino, really, in that he's an attractive manager. He's someone that sounds like he would fit in well at some top clubs, but has never really quite got across the line at those top clubs and delivered silverware. It would be maybe a more sensible appointment than Graham Potter. But again, he's a young manager. He's only about 35, which there have been a couple of reports out there that is a bit of a concern to the Chelsea owners. And it's another gamble, really. Graham Potter was a big gamble, one that's quite sadly not paid off. It would have been nice to have them keep their faith that they promised him and push that through and see what could have happened with a bit of time and a bit of patience. And they're going to have a similar thing if they go for Julian Nagelsmann. He doesn't seem like the sort of manager that's going to come in and deliver the instant hit of trophies that they want. And whether he gets in as well before the Real Madrid tie is a huge question. You know, the understanding from a lot of people is that Nagelsmann wants a bit of time off after what's just happened at Bayern Munich. And I think any sensible manager wouldn't take this job until the summer anyway.
Yeah, it'll also be Interesting to see if Graham Potter actually has some time. Obviously, he's been linked with a number of jobs, with Leicester being one of them. Right, let's move on to the Independent, shall we? Because, Miguel, this is your piece, headline being Chelsea set priorities for next manager as pressure grows on Serge. What do you mean by those priorities, Miguel?
Well, the biggest, I suppose, is, I mean, it's a lot of what was said when Potter got the job and why he got the job, which was a willingness to buy in to a new club culture, one that actually involves not just being the head coach, is what Thomas Tuchel was, but being overseeing a lot of the wider structure, being consulted on such issues, and also going with this new approach, which is, I suppose, something akin to Liverpool between 2017 and 2020, if maybe with a lot greater expenditure, of bringing through a lot of the next generation of talent. And that's created problems, of course, because at the moment it does feel like Chelsea almost have two squads. One, which was the old Thomas Tuchel, Frank Lampard, Roman Abramovich era squad, and now almost a completely new one that still has some gaps. So any manager would have to accept that situation. But of course, there is almost, it can almost feel there's a little bit of a contradiction in terms here, and this is something that I suppose was articulated with Tuchel and why they got rid of him. In that any manager who's willing to accept that, which is essentially a lot of consultation on club issues, does he have that kind of hard edge that really separates the top managers, because they can be very intense, tunnel vision people. That's the nature of that level. So it's going to be very interesting to see what they do. I would agree with Jack in that I think it's ambitious to get someone in before the Real Madrid game, but that also, it does touch on something which I find quite remarkable here, so we've got two of the wealthiest clubs in the world, Chelsea and Spurs, one going for the Champions League again, a second successive qualification if they can manage it, one 2 games away from a Champions League semi-final, and going to the Bernabeu next week. And both, they don't even have caretaker managers in the guise of Goose Hiddink. They've both got kind of stand-ins who were assistants and have no real managerial experience. It's kind of remarkable we're in this situation, given the stakes. Jack,
what do you think all of this, Graham Potter, the sacking of Thomas Tuchel, has told us about Chelsea's new owners?
They're learning on the job and having to do it quite quickly, I think, really. That's the big surprise, really, is that, you know, in hiring Graham Potter and the pitch they gave him when he went there to be, you know, this new Chelsea and moving away from the hire and fire, and whatever happened, they give him time to succeed in the job and give him the tools to do that. They sort of looked to copy and paste what he'd done at Brighton on a bigger scale, taking all his staff with him, taking some recruitment staff as well, and they've just done it on fast forward. It shows a lot of inexperience. It's not the way that you build a successful cultural club. They, you know, rip things apart behind the scenes with a lot of chopping and changing and then throwing money and a lot of players to give Graham Potter, you know, someone that needs time to work individually with these players and get his methods across, give him a squad that makes it really hard to do that. You know, he had 35 players to work with, which, as good as he is at man management and emotional intelligence, you know, that's a very hard job for some of the best man managers out there, to keep all of those players happy, players with egos and profiles that he's not really experienced before. So I think it's just quite a bad reading of what makes things work at a football club and at a high level from Todd Boehly and everyone involved so far. And they're going to have to, you know, take stock and maybe approach things slightly differently going forwards.
Let's return to the troubles at Chelsea, shall we? Because the back page of the Mirror goes with lost the plot. Now, this is regarding Bruno Saltor as he's taking charge of Chelsea for tomorrow's game. And he actually admits that he's never before actually picked a football team. I mean, how concerning is that, Miguel?
It's a remarkable story, really. And again, I mean, whatever about facing Jurgen Klopp, one of the, you know, the greatest managers in the history of the modern game, a recent Champions League winner, a recent league winner. I mean, that's a massive test for a first match in itself. But then next week he's going to, I mean, the sort of thing that most managers spend their career dreaming of, which is a massive Champions League game at the Bernabeu against the European champions. And it was given the recent history of the Champions League, and it's sometimes won by odd teams that aren't doing well. I mean, it's not completely out of the bounds of possibility that he could end this season a Champions League. But I have to say, one of my feelings for the season was that Chelsea would continue to have a really bad domestic season, but Potter might raise it in the Champions League and potentially be a European Cup winner in the way Roberto Di Matteo was. But I suppose a lot for that situation right now with Bruno, an awful lot has to go right, because this is it's a situation almost veering on absurdity, really.
And Jack, I mean, for Bruno, he's also got to manage big personalities, and the dressing room has a price tag of 600 million, so it can't be a bigger task for him.
No, it's a huge one, isn't it? I'm sure, you know, people who you speak to at Brighton, where he's obviously a player and then a coach for a long time, speak with huge respect about him. He's clearly no mug in terms of had a decent playing career, a lot of appearances in the Premier League for Brighton, but this is a whole new level, isn't it? I mean, he's maybe used to facing Raheem Sterling in games when they would have played against each other between Brighton and Manchester City, but coaching him and telling him what to do, and coaching a squad that, you know, as you said, costs hundreds of millions with a lot of players and a lot of star names around. Graham Potter struggled to do it, and he's got years of experience as a manager. Bruno's only been a coach for a few years, having retired at Brighton. This is just going to be a whirlwind for him. It's going to be a huge learning curve, a fantastic chance, of course, to maybe spring a surprise and make a statement and get a coaching job, whether that be at Chelsea, you'd be hugely surprised, or elsewhere further down the line. But it's a really difficult challenge.
As for...
just on that, Katie.
Oh, yeah,
sorry.
Go on. Go ahead.
This is actually something Jack mentioned when we were speaking off air earlier. I think it's slightly surprising that Chelsea haven't gone in for a caretaker, given that, from that perspective, Bruno almost represents the same style of football as Potter. So it's not that kind of that change you sometimes need in these situations. And so they mightn't get the potential benefit that comes with that abrupt switch. And I have to say, again, like it was a point I made earlier as well, I'm slightly surprised they haven't gone for a caretaker in the situation, given, you know, Chelsea have a lot of ample potential candidates for something short term, given they've got so many recent players and recent legends, really, that have gone into management or coaching.